The floodwaters had receded, but the mud still clung to her wedding dress like a second skin. She stood at the edge of the ruined chapel, veil half torn, hair soaked, fists trembling. Behind her, the town watched in silence. In front of her, he waited, jaw set, hat in hand, and a bullet wound darkening his side. "I ain't gonna beg," he muttered. "But I ain't walking away neither." A baby cried somewhere in the crowd. A woman crossed herself. The preacher's voice finally broke the stillness. "Then by the will of this town you'll wed, or you'll both be gone by morning." Her lips parted to speak, but the wind whipped past like a warning. Her eyes searched his face, remembering the night the river rose and he'd come riding through death to find her. The outlaw with Apache blood. The man they all hated. The man who saved her life. She blinked against the sting in her eyes. Then she looked down, at the blood still drying on her hem. "Before we jump back in, introduce yourself and where you're tuning in from, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next in this wild Old West tale of floodwaters, forced vows, and forbidden love." Dust never really settled in Rattler's Hollow. It just drifted, low and lazy, curling through the boots of strangers and settling into the lungs of those too poor or too stubborn to leave. By mid-morning, the sun hung high and judgmental. Heat shimmered above the dry earth, and the wooden planks of Main Street creaked under the weight of gossip and boots. Horses stood tethered in silence, flies circling their eyes. A dog barked once, then fell quiet again, as if reminded the town preferred whispers over noise. She walked with her head down, like always, her left boot dragging slightly. That limp had followed her since the river took her husband 3 winters ago. The same river that curved just outside of town like a lazy snake, always threatening to snap awake. They said she used to sing, loud enough to echo off canyon walls. But ever since Jacob drowned, and she came back half-soaked and screaming, the silence had hung heavy around her. Some said she screamed so hard that day it cracked something inside her. Others claimed she hadn't spoken since. Her name was Clara, but in town she was just the preacher's daughter, widow, burden. Strange girl who lived alone now in the parsonage behind the church, baking bread she never sold, and tending a garden that refused to grow. The scar on her cheek, barely visible now, was from the night she tried to save Jacob. A branch, or maybe a rock. She never said. She didn't say much of anything, not because she couldn't, she just didn't see the point anymore. Clara's world was narrow, church pews, empty fields, a kitchen that echoed, and always the weight of people's eyes when she walked past them. She could feel the stares, sharp as thorns. Some pitied her, some blamed her. All of them avoided her. The girls her age, Maggie, Ruth, and the others, stopped calling on her long ago, said she spooked them, said she talked to the wind. One claimed Clara once slept out by the river and came back humming a song no one could place. It didn't help that she wore black, long after mourning etiquette said to stop. The only ones who spoke to her regularly were the children, and even they had learned to whisper. She'd hear them sometimes. She talks to spirits. She sees things. Her husband's ghost walks with her. Once, a boy dared another to touch her dress. Clara had turned, slowly, and looked the child straight in the eye. She didn't speak, but the look had been enough to send him running. Clara's father, Reverend Price, did what he could. He preached hope on Sundays, and forgiveness on Wednesdays. But even he had stopped walking her home after evening service. Some said he resented her for surviving when Jacob hadn't. Others said he feared her silence might be catching. The truth was simpler. Clara didn't fit. Not into the town, not into the pews, not into the tidy proper mold folks expected from a preacher's daughter. She moved like someone stitched together wrong. Graceful, but guarded, as if every step might split her open again. And when she did speak, which was rare, it was with a softness that made people lean in too close like they might miss something vital. The silence was loudest at night. That was when she walked the river's edge, barefoot, trailing her fingers through the tall grass. She didn't cry anymore. There was nothing left to mourn. Just an ache, dull, constant, that stretched like a rope around her chest. Sometimes, she'd whisper Jacob's name, but not because she thought he'd answer, just to feel it in the air again. To remind herself he'd been real. The townsfolk didn't see that version of her. They only saw her in daylight, limping past the mercantile, scarf pulled tight, eyes down. They didn't see the way she stood, at the river's edge at midnight, whispering to ghosts. They didn't know that she prayed, not to God, but to the water, and the water never answered. Not until the day it rose. It began with the wind, the kind that kicks up before a storm, not loud, not angry, just different, the kind that slips under doors and rattles thoughts loose in your mind. Clara was stringing up laundry when it came. The sky was still blue, but something had shifted. Even the chickens quieted, their heads tilted like they were listening to something she couldn't hear. And then came the hooves. A lone horse. Slow gait. Not the kind of hurry a cowboy uses when he's just passing through. No, this one was deliberate, calculated. He rode straight into town like he didn't care what anyone thought, and that alone made people stare. Clara saw him from the edge of the parsonage yard. His horse was black as coal and slick with trail, dust. He wore no badge, no star. His boots were scuffed, spurs silent. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed most of his face, but his posture said everything. He was watching. Not just the buildings, but the people. Measuring them. And when his eyes finally met Clara's, they didn't flinch. She felt it in her stomach first. Like a drop. Like stepping off a ledge in a dream. A flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Being seen. Not pitied, not judged. Just noticed. Their gaze held for a breath longer than it should have. Then she turned back. To her laundry, the man dismounted in front of the saloon. Didn't tie his horse. Just let it stand. A few ranch hands muttered behind their whiskey glasses, already whispering. "That's him," someone said. "The Apache's boy. Saw him once near Tana Ridge. I heard he's got a bounty in 2 counties. No law'd dare come this deep, not for him. Wonder what he wants in our town." Clara stayed behind the parsonage fence, but she heard the rumors grow like storm clouds. That night at supper, her father prayed louder than usual. He didn't mention the stranger by name, but everyone knew who he meant. "Lord, protect our town from wolves in borrowed skin, from shadows that speak in tongues not of your making." Clara's hands tightened on her fork. She didn't finish her stew. The next time she saw him, it was at the well. She'd come early, hoping to avoid stairs. Her bucket squeaked as it descended. The wind tugged gently at her skirt. Then a shadow crossed hers. He didn't say a word. Just stood beside her with a second rope and dipped his own bucket in. The silence between them was thick, but not empty. It felt intentional. He pulled his water first and stepped back, giving her space. Then, with a small nod, he reached into his coat and held something out to her. A peach, dried, half wrapped in cloth. She looked at it, then at him. "It's not poisoned," he said finally, voice low and even. "Just figured you might want something sweet for once." She took it. Not because she wanted a peach, but because no one had offered her anything without expecting something in return. Not in years. "Thank you," she said softly. He touched the brim of his hat. "Name's Elias." She nodded once. "Clara." That was all. That day. Just a name. A peach. A shared silence at the well. But it was enough to set the town on fire. Dusk. Whispers flew thicker than flies at a butcher's table. She was talking to him. You think they're meeting in secret. Preacher's girl shaming herself with his kind. By morning, someone had carved a warning into the saloon's back door. Half-breed out, and underneath it, "Take her with you." Clara felt it again. The shift in the wind. She didn't know where Elias came from or why he stayed, but something about him unnerved the town. Maybe it was the way he didn't explain himself, the way he walked without apology. Or maybe it was the way he looked at her, like he saw more than the limp or the widow's clothes. She wasn't used to being wanted. Not like that. Not with respect. They met again by the river. Unplanned. unspoken. It was just where they both ended up. He stood with his boots in the mud, staring down at the water like it owed him something. She didn't speak, just stood beside him. After a while, he broke the silence. "You ever think about leaving?" She glanced at him. "All the time." "Why don't you?" She looked down at her skirts, the hem still stained from last week's storm. "Some roots grow too deep." He nodded, not pressing her. Then he said, "Storm's coming." She followed his gaze. The sky was darkening in the west, slow and heavy. "I know," she said. "I can feel it." The next morning, the flood came, not all at once. Just a rumble, a warning. But Clara knew the sound. She dropped her basket and ran. The river had swallowed the banks already, licking at fence posts and creeping toward the chapel steps. A child screamed. Horses bucked. Men shouted orders no one followed, and in the middle of it, Elias rode into the water. Clara watched, breath caught, as he turned his horse hard and grabbed the reins of a runaway mule cart. A girl was trapped inside, Sarah Weller, barely 10. The cart twisted in the current, but Elias didn't let go. He pulled her free, slung her over his shoulder, and trudged back through the water like it was nothing. Clara ran to help. The water hit her knees. She slipped once, hard, but hands caught her. His hands. They didn't speak. They just moved, together, pulling child after child to higher ground. When the last one was safe, they collapsed near the edge of town, soaked to the bone. For the first time in years, Clara laughed. It startled even her. He looked at her. "That's a sound I didn't expect." She met his eyes. "Neither did I." By nightfall, the flood had pulled back. But what it left behind wasn't just mud and broken fences. It left suspicion, bitter and sharp. Men stood in circles outside the saloon. Women whispered behind closed shutters, and Clara saw it coming. What always came next? It wasn't thanks they'd offer Elias. It was judgment, and this time, they were coming for both of them. The river receded, but the town didn't soften. If anything, the flood had stripped away its politeness, left behind bare nerves and old bitterness. Clara felt it in the way people looked at her now, not with pity, but with quiet accusation. As if helping Elias pull children from rising water had somehow confirmed everything they'd already chosen to believe, that she was too strange, too different, too much like him. On the third day after the flood, someone slashed her garden fence, tomatoes ripped from their vines. Herbs stomped into the soil, a dead crow nailed to her gate. No note, just a message written in ruin. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just knelt in the dirt and picked up the pieces one by one. Her father, Reverend Price, didn't speak of it at supper, but he didn't look at her either. When she finally asked, voice low, "Do you believe what they're saying?" He only replied, "Sometimes a daughter reflects the storm more than she realizes." She didn't finish her stew. Again. That night, the church bell rang at an odd hour. Clara came running from the parsonage barefoot, shawl clutched tight. She expected fire or a sick child. Instead, she found the congregation gathered in silence. Lanterns lit, eyes on her. A man she didn't know stepped forward, deputy from north of the ridge. "We've had word Elias Gray's wanted in Bisbee. Robbery, assault, possibly worse." Clara shook her head before she even understood the words. "No," she said. "He's not. He saved—" "Quiet, girl." That from one of the elders. "You'll have your chance." Then another voice stepped forward from the crowd. A soft one. A woman. Maggie. I saw them. Together. After dark. Out past the ridge. Clara's stomach turned cold. It wasn't true. Not the way they meant it. But truth wasn't what mattered here. "Town's got a right to protect its own," someone added. "And if she's choosing to side with him," said another, "maybe she ought to go with him." Her father stood at the front, hands clasped, silent. He didn't defend her, not even once. They locked her in the back of the church, said it was for her safety, until they could sort things out. A mercy, they called it. She sat alone on the cold wooden floor, dress wet at the hem, wrists trembling. The door was barred, the windows high. No food, no candle, no word. She didn't weep, but her chest ached like something had cracked open inside. By morning, snow had started to fall. Early for the season. Too early. The air bit through the cracks in the window frame. Clara pressed her back to the wall, pulled her knees in. She heard someone arguing outside. Then a crash. Then silence. And then footsteps. The door creaked open. Elias stood there, hat in hand, breathing hard. He didn't rush to her, didn't touch her, just held the door open. "Come on," he said. "You don't belong here." She ran, not away from him, but from the town, out through the side path, boots sliding in the half-melted snow. Her breath came fast, chest burning. Shawl flapping behind like a broken wing. Elias followed, silent. A shadow behind her, not chasing, just staying close. At the edge of the ridge, her knees buckled. She collapsed into the snow, bare hands sinking into cold earth. She gasped once, twice, and then nothing. Just the sound of wind and the distant hush of pine. He didn't touch her. Not at first. Just crouched beside her, quiet as snowfall. "You hurt?" he asked gently. She shook her head, but tears rolled down anyway. "I didn't do anything," she whispered. "I didn't do anything. I know. They all hate me. Even my father, he couldn't even—" Her voice broke. Still, he didn't interrupt. He just took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. Sat down beside her in the snow. No rescue, no speeches. Just a presence, solid, steady. After a while she spoke again, voice soft and cracked. "Why are you here?" He stared ahead at the trees. "I owed someone a favor. A man who took me in once. Apache scout. Said if I ever passed through this part of the country I should check on the preacher's girl." She blinked. "You knew me?" He nodded. "Didn't expect you'd still be here." Silence again. Then, slowly, "You could have left." "Could have," he said. "But then I saw the way they looked at you, the way you walked all bent up with silence, and I figured, maybe it's not about who we were. Maybe it's about what we can stand beside." She turned to look at him fully now. His face was wind-chapped, dark from sun and travel. Eyes sharp, but not unkind. Not hardened like the others. "You're not afraid of them?" she asked. "I've been chased by better." She smiled through the tears. They stayed like that for a long time. Just two broken things, side by side in the snow. No vows, no rescue, just presence, real care. By nightfall, they made a fire under the trees. Elias cooked beans over a low flame, careful not to let the smoke rise high. Clara sat close, hands wrapped in his coat sleeves. He handed her a tin cup. "I'm not good at much," he said, "but I can cook, and I know how to run." She looked at the sky, quiet. "I'm tired of running." He nodded. "Then we don't. Not yet. Not until you say." That night, she slept with her head on his shoulder, and he didn't move once. He just watched the fire burn low and listened to her breathe. Not her protector, not her savior, just someone who stayed. The first morning after the snow, Clara didn't want to rise. Her body ached from cold and fear, from everything she hadn't said, hadn't screamed. But when she opened her eyes, Elias was already up, feeding the horses. Quiet, intentional, as if survival was a habit, not a miracle. She sat, up slowly, still wrapped in his coat, and watched the breath rise from his mouth like smoke. His presence, unrushed, unshaken, grounded her. For the first time in her life, no one was watching her like she was broken. No one was waiting for her to fail. She was just here, cold, alive, uncertain, and free. They camped for a week in a low valley near the pines, cut wood, fished the river, kept low. At night, she asked him questions she hadn't dared voice in town. Were you really born to Apache people? Did you do the things they say? Are you going to leave? He answered them, sometimes with words, sometimes with silence. His mother had been White Mountain Apache, taken too young. His father, a white rancher who never claimed him. Yes, he had stolen, fought, survived. No, he wasn't going anywhere. Not if she didn't ask him to. On the 8th day, Clara found a burned-out homestead on the edge of the valley, charred walls, stone hearth still standing, blackened beams swallowed by grass and time. The snow had melted in patches, revealing what used to be a fence line. She stood in the ruin for a long time. Elias came up beside her, arms folded. "I think," she said, slowly, "we could build something here." He raised an eyebrow. "We?" She nodded, steady. "I don't want to hide. Not forever. And I don't want to go back." His face didn't change, but his voice was quieter when he said, "Then, we build." It wasn't much at first. A lean-to, a pile of firewood, a fence made from split logs and stubborn pride. He taught her how to sand wood smooth, how to patch a roof with pine bark and oilcloth. She taught him how to grow herbs, how to mend a shirt sleeve with tiny, perfect stitches. They worked until their hands blistered and their backs ached. At night they sat by the hearth and passed a flask between them. Not lovers, not yet, but something was forming in the silence, something earned. A month passed, then came the lawman. Clara saw the dust on the horizon first. One rider, fast. She stood slowly, apron clutched in her fists, heart hammering. Elias stepped out of the shed, saw the same cloud of dust and didn't hesitate. He unbuckled his tool belt, strapped on the revolver he'd kept buried in their gear. Clara said nothing, just stood beside him. The rider crested the ridge, a badge on his chest, dust on his face. "Deputy Thomas Crane from Bisbee. You Elias." "Gray?" he called. Elias didn't answer. "I got a warrant, robbery, attempted murder, Apache raid out near Safford. Witness says they saw your face." Clara stepped forward before she could stop herself. "He's not a raider. He was here, building this." Crane looked at her like she was simple. "You vouching for him, preacher's girl?" "I'm not a girl anymore." Elias stepped between them then, calm but direct. "That raid happened. After I left the South Trail, you check with the stage master in Pine Water. He saw me head north 3 days before." Crane spat in the dirt. "Maybe I will, but folks don't care for your kind clearing land like it's yours, and they sure don't care for her living in sin out here with you." Clara's spine stiffened. Elias didn't flinch. "We're not hiding, just working." Crane holstered his gun, but not before letting his fingers linger on the grip. "Work all you want, but I'll be back. And if she's still here when I come, I won't be alone." Then he rode off. That night, Clara didn't speak for a long time. She sat at the edge of the fire, staring at the flames like they might whisper some answer. Elias brought her a blanket, sat beside her. "You could still go," he said softly. "You've got cousins west of here, safer places." She turned toward him, slow. "Do you want me to go?" "No." "Then don't ask me again." A pause. He said, "If they come back, I won't run. But I won't let them take you." Looked at him for a long time, then finally she said, "I'm not asking you to save me, Elias. I just want to stand beside you." 2 weeks later, they raised the walls, 4 corners, a roof, a door that latched. It wasn't a house yet, but it was more than shelter. It was choice. It was theirs. They carved initials into the doorframe, not as a declaration, just a mark. A moment claimed. But peace never lingers long in these lands. One morning, Clara found Elias sitting by the fire, holding a letter. His hands were shaking. She sat beside him, gently pulled the paper from his fingers. It was written in a child's hand. "Mama says I shouldn't write, but I wanted you to know Pa died. They buried him last fall. I miss you, Elias. I tell folks you were a scout and a hero, even if they say bad things. Love, June, his half-sister." He hadn't seen her in 5 years. "Clara, read the letter twice." Then she looked at him. "You have to go." He didn't answer. "Elias." His jaw clenched. "If I go, they'll follow me back. If I stay, I leave her alone in that hell." Clara stood. "Then I go with you." He looked up, eyes wide. She nodded, firm. Wherever you go, I go. He exhaled slowly, pain flickering in his expression. You sure about that? I'm not a girl anymore, she said again. He stood, crossed to her and touched her hand, calloused meeting calloused. They stood in the half-finished doorway of their cabin. Snow dusted the ridge again, and in the cold wind, she whispered, Let's finish the firewood, then we'll ride. They rode back into town at dawn, not in secret, not with weapons drawn, just two riders on worn horses, one with a rifle across his back, the other with a pale green shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. The town was still blinking off its sleep when the hooves echoed on the main street. Doors opened, curtains twitched. The old saloon keeper straightened his apron without meaning to. Clara kept her head high. She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. Elias rode a step behind her, not shielding her, just following her lead. They stopped outside the church. She dismounted first, walked up the old wooden steps that had once led her to sermons, to shame, to the quiet corner where girls were taught not to be seen too brightly. Reverend Price stood waiting in the doorway, not surprised, not moved. You've made your bed, he said, voice like flint. You expect a father's blessing now? She met his eyes and shook her head. No, she said. I expect nothing from you anymore. That silenced even the murmurs gathering behind her. She stepped down again, slowly, deliberately, and walked to Elias, took his hand, held it tight, then turned to face the town. We're not hiding, she said. Not anymore. You called it sin. I call it surviving. Someone in the crowd scoffed. Someone else said, Where will you go? Clara smiled softly. Anywhere. That isn't here. She didn't look back. They didn't ride far. Not that day. They returned to the ridge, to the place where fire and frost had made them honest. And there, under the cold stars, with a ring made from braided horsehair and no witnesses but the trees, they said their vows. I'll walk beside you when it's easy, she whispered, and stand in front of you when it's not. He pressed her fingers to his lips. And I'll never ask you to be smaller than you are. The stars flickered above like candles, at a wake, mourning the life they'd left behind, blessing the one they were beginning. Weeks passed. A doorframe became a cabin. A hearth became a home. And one spring morning, Clara woke him with a kiss and a smile that didn't need words. By summer, a cradle sat near the fire. Handmade, cedar sweet, with a name carved into the wood, Maggie June Gray, for the sister who'd forgiven, and the girl who'd once betrayed, but in her own broken way, had saved Clara from waiting a lifetime to be chosen. Sometimes Clara would walk to the edge of the ridge, baby on her hip, and stare down at the town below. It was smaller, now, or maybe she'd simply outgrown it. They said her name differently these days, softly, like something sacred. She never answered. She had no need to. The wind still carried rumors. Of course it did. They said the preacher's daughter had cursed the land. Others swore she'd tamed the outlaw, made him settle. Some whispered she was touched by something divine. Others, something darker. But Elias never listened. And Clara? She only smiled. She was never a curse. She was someone's miracle all along. Subscribe, and let me introduce you to the next miracle tomorrow.